Today's books are all about giving someone the time of day. I think when I was looking at them as a sort of a bundle to talk to you about today, I was wondering, there are so many connections between them, but I think the strongest one is about kindness and how that can change things for one person or many. First one up is Anna Johnston's The Borrowed Life of Frederick, Fife. And I think you kind of get a feel, this is a proof copy, so the cover looks pretty like that. Gives you an idea of the sort of the man called Ove feel. Got to pronounce that one correctly. It's her debut. And what I loved about this, it's a book essentially about not just giving people the kinds of day, but actively trying to make things better for other people. It's a borrowed life in that our main character, Frederick Fife, has fallen upon harder times than he had probably anticipated. And through a quirk of fate, I'm not going to go into it, he finds himself in the shoes of Bernard Greer, who is a resident of an old folks' home. And that switch, if you like, of the two men is not only made easier by the fact that they looked remarkably similar, but also that with Greer had been suffering from a kind of dementia, didn't really make an awful lot of sense. So our main character, Fred, who finds himself in the same place, accident happening to one, not to the other, is sort of hoiked back into Greer's wheelchair. And he says, but I'm Fred. And they go, yeah, of course you're Fred. So he ends up entering into this life of relative luxury because he's looked after. There are people who take great care of him, and he eats well. And having been just on the brink of poverty/eviction, this is rather a good gig. And as he becomes embroiled in the lives of the carers, or the less in charge, more in charge people around him, the other residents, you can see him sort of trying to make things better for everybody. And at some point, what turns up, or what fate intervenes in, he's not sure how long he's going to be able to keep this up. And fate does intervene in the form of the person he is supplanting. Bernard Greer had a daughter, and this daughter will then, who hasn't seen him for a long time, so this daughter will turn up, and things will go from already cheekily fun and a little bit sort of he's on edge to quite messy. Anna Johnston knows her senior citizens extremely well. There's a lot of light-hearted fun, but there's also a definite, it's an ode, if you like, to all the care, people who work in senior citizen care. It's an ode to kindness. It's an ode to young love. It's an ode to fellowship and trying to do your best for everybody. It's very light. It's but behind that is that lovely thread of what seniors are like, and it's open, generous. We have, waterworks problems. We have farting. We have lust. We have being ridiculous, and we have being wise and tender and caring, and it's all in there, and it very much celebrates the senior citizens in our lives. So I'm about to say undemanding, which might belittle it, but it's not going to do your head in. Overwhelmingly, it's about kindness. Kindness brings me to the second book, which is Edenhope by Louise Lanela. Louise did come in and chat. So there is a video prior to this one where she explains where her story comes from. So I'll try not to repeat any of that. But this was a book that sideswiped me. Again, it's dealing with how people may or may not be there to help you when life is getting very complicated. And I felt this was difficult terrain to be writing, but I was never once pulled out of the story by the writing. I was completely immersed. And I felt that to be a remarkable feat, because we're talking about, well, our main character, Marnie, is 63. on her own has moved into a smaller living accommodation because, well, needs must. And you kind of feel that she's done her best in life. She's been married, she has a daughter, and that she's sort of, a career is a stop and start thing for older women, so that she may not have, amassed all her riches. And her husband has since moved away. So she is left with this kind of diminished reserves for herself. But she's quite happy, got a little job in a sort of bazaar, sort of $2 shop style, where she's quite happy to, and, content with little. But then into her life again, you feel this has happened many times, comes her daughter, Lenny, with unpleasant boyfriend in tow, one of a series, and two very young children, Koa and Frankie. And Koa is still a toddler, very small, and well, Frankie's a toddler too. They're both very, very young children. Lenny, Marnie's daughter, is a drug addict, and this is what I was what I loved most about this book, is that we were able to read into terrain which is kind of like, oh my God, I don't really want to know about all of that because it's so bleak, it's very sordid and all that. But it's the way it's written that Lenny tackles it is what it's like to be a person on the outside of that. So we're not being asked to sit on the shoulder of Lenny. We're being asked to sit on the shoulder of a mother of someone who knows that 90% of the time she's not actually even connecting with her daughter. She's connecting with the drug. And this is something that I learned from the author, from Louise, when she was talking about it, saying that you are actually talking. It's the drug that's talking. And it gives us that little remove, which is a breathing space. But after that, you don't really breathe very much. So Lenny turns up. Marnie understands that this visit will not be short. And at some point, she kind of witnesses she very definitely witnesses the behaviour towards her grandchildren that she finds kind of troubling, that where they needed love and support, they were being told to literally shut up and go and play somewhere else and not be a nuisance. And one day, enough is enough. She bundles them into her car and just kind of drives with no plan in mind. And from here on, it's really a story about the repercussions. Did she have the right to do that? And what she's prepared to do for these two children. And she's not got huge amounts of money, but it's all the other people she comes across and the people's small chances, just the job there, the decision there, but also how social services, the child protection services, Centrelink, how we negotiate those, what are the support systems available, and the support systems available for people who are the family of drug addicts, and how they need and they can access those support systems. I found this fascinating. To be totally honest, I spent more time wiping tears saying, oh my God, this is, it's a gut punch of emotion, but written with fierce intelligence. And I loved Marnie so much. And there were some divine men, because Marnie had a start in life. And it's those inconsequential or sort of almost coincidental meetings with people that set you on a path. So there's very strongly about women and the kind of the invisibleness of the older woman. There is also a lot about men lifting men up, or one particular man who tries to give everybody a second chance, and how that pays it forward. Superbly well written. I was carried along on an emotional journey, and boy, wanted to scoop those toddlers up and say, it's all right, that's what we're here for, the older generation, to try and, mend the potholes in the paths of those who, don't mean to do it that way, but just get themselves into trouble. Superb book. And the last one up for today is Mitch Jennings, a town called Treachery, which is, someone calls it Aussie Noir. You can get a feel of it from that cover. Yes, it's a thriller, but it's got a sort of feel which for me is a cross between sort of Boy Swallows Universe by Trent Dalton and then many of the Chris Hammer, particularly the Martin Scarston series. Um, I really enjoyed this book. I've felt it very well put together. The writing, of course, is exceptional, and Jennings is a sports writer, so has that journalistic background, and that's what he brings to the stories. He allows us to solve or to come across our murder. So there's a murder at the beginning of the corpse at the beginning of the book. That sounds weird. There's a corpse at the beginning of this book. I should reword that, but don't worry about it. But to look at the story from the point of view of a journalist, Stuart Dryden, and this young fella, 11-year-old Matt or Matthew Finnerty, who's really the kind of the center or the heart of this. And it's because of a moment of sort of tolerance, even because Stuart's not necessarily the most patient man. His life isn't together. He's a small town town called Treachery chronicle. You feel that basically, we talked about potholes. I've just mentioned potholes. Some of the most exciting things that happen in his town are that there are potholes, and this is one of the biggest anyone has ever seen. There are neighbours who have dog shit dumped on them, and these are the excitement levels of his stories until one day, this young fella, Matthew, who is living with his father and grandfather. His mother, we learn, is dead. His father suffers from oblivion seeking, but not to the extent of not being able to work. And he does his best for Matt. But it's sometimes Matt is left to figure things out on his own a bit. And he's not abandoned, but he's been asked to grow way beyond his 11 years. And Matt is fascinated by becoming a journalist, and then happens upon this scene where there's a body on the beach at the bottom of an overhang, and he manages to take a couple of photos, and as it turns out, presents those photos to our journalist. And when Dryden eventually sort of realizes that this boy has potential gold, he sort of says, well, you can come along and be a sort of cadet, and I'll teach you the ropes. And that is the beginning of sort of that tolerance, or that giving him the time of day meant that not only our story can evolve, but also that Matt gets a chance to lift himself up from the kind of bit of the misery. He's bullied in school, makes friends with this new boy called Pod, who's a big, lumbering, slightly overweight, wow. But a well-fed boy who's kind of straight up and takes on the bullies and introduces Matt to his family, who are larger than life, from a bikey background, but very loving, and are embroiled in the whole story, as it turns out. Who the goodies are and who the baddies are is something you're never sure of. Dryden himself is kind of a little bit alcoholic, a little bit, he's that sort of sloppy, shambolic sort of person, but when he gets his head together and teams up with a rather superior journalist who seems to be sort of making a play for him, doing the seductive routine, is that going to turn into something else? The murdered woman was a school teacher, much loved by everybody, particularly by our Matty. How did she die? What is the relationship with drugs being washed up, with people being seen in certain places? It's an absolute page turner. It's got that sort of I don't know, that sort of feel of I have to get to the next bit, I have to see what happens, but it's heart tugging. It's got all the feels, and you're rooting for love, and you're rooting for getting Matty's father together, finding out his story and what had gone on in the background, and the fact that his father, Robbie, is a little bit the town's black sheep, and people do unload that thing that we see all the time, which is knee-jerk. He's the obvious person, he'd known, you know, how's that all going to play out. I'm not going to, I hope I haven't given too much away, but it's a stunner of a read. As a debut crime, I would say I'm waiting for the next one. So you know that I've loved it. Have a look through those. You could, God, that sounded a bit peremptory, but you know, if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. And I have a couple more, which it shouldn't be too long before I get those onto the screen. Ta-da! So see you next time.